David Hume is known for discovering the fallacy of deriving ought from is. He notices that while reading, there are many is statements, and then all of a sudden, from these is statements, there is an ought statement that is derived. And not only an ought statement seems to follow these is statements, but statements involving good and evil. This seems strange to Hume. How is it that these ought statements and these statements involving good and evil, how can they be derived from these normal declarative statements? Statements that just point out some simple fact, like the coffee cup is blue, they are drastically different than if somebody were to say murder is wrong. You should not steal. These statements, according to Hume, they are so different that it is hard to imagine that one can be derived from the other. But this is commonly done every day. Every day people notice simple facts about the world and they derive ought statements. If I walk outside and see a busy street, what is statement can I say about that? The street is busy. If I notice that cars go over 80 miles per hour on that street, what is statement can be said here? Cars go faster than 80 miles per hour on this street. And from these two simple facts, I can say to my child who is 5 years old, you should not run across this street. And that seems pretty logical. Any good parent would say that type of statement based on those simple facts. But David Hume is claiming this is strange. Of course, to normal people every day, it's not a problem at all. You need to make these conclusions with an ought based on seeing simple facts. The fact value problem is based on this distinction between a supposed factual statement and a value statement. So if you say this movie is good, that's a value statement. You're judging whether the movie is good or not. If you say you should not cross the street, that is based also on a value judgment. The value judgment that is implied is that it is bad to cross the street. The fallacy of deriving ought from is and the fact value problem, they are the basis for a moral theory known as emotivism. This theory of emotivism says that moral utterances are meaningless. They are merely the expression of feelings. So when somebody says some sort of moral statement like it is wrong to steal, what they really mean by this, according to emotivism, is some sort of moral utterance like stealing, boo, kind of like being at a play and the villain comes out and everybody says boo. That's what a moral statement is. That's what a moral judgment is, according to emotivism. So Hume has two major contributions here. First, the fallacy of deriving ought from is, which illuminates the difference between a fact and a value, and the idea that moral statements and moral judgments, they are just utterances of feelings and emotions. How David Hume arrives at this conclusion is through many different arguments. First of all, David Hume makes a distinction between reason and feelings. Reason judges matters of fact or relations. Think about how you reason in mathematics or in geometry. When you affirm that 2 and 3 equal 5, you understand the equality going on in that statement, but try to take that clarity between that mathematical statement and apply it to a moral situation. Where's that clear relation in the statement if we are going to talk about crime or some sort of murder or theft that happens? Is the relation as clear as mathematics? There are so many factors involved when somebody decides to steal something that it can be very confusing. You definitely do not have the clarity of mathematics. According to Hume, morality is determined by sentiments or feelings. When somebody does something good, when somebody has a supposed good habit, all that means is that that person is doing something that has pleasing effects, that produces pleasing feelings in that person and those around that person. Because according to Hume, at the root of morality, at the root of virtue and vice is merely feelings. It is merely sentiment. And so when somebody does something good, that just means that they are doing something that produces some sort of pleasure in people. Not only does it produce some sort of pleasure, but that pleasure is useful. So when somebody is just and they have the virtue of justice, what this means to Hume is that this person is doing things that are useful in the community. There is utility because the utility, it's derived from pleasure. The utility is a pleasing consequence when somebody acts. Hume goes on to try to explain why this type of thinking is correct, and he does something similar to what Descartes does. The French philosopher René Descartes, when he was implementing his hyperbolic doubt, he went into some sort of fantastic story in order to prove his point. David Hume, he does the same thing. David Hume is going to suppose if we lived in a world where everybody was perfect, there would be no need for justice. There would be no use for justice. And so David Hume is fantasizing that if there was some sort of perfect world and everybody had all the virtues in abundance, there would be no use for justice. And so Hume is going to conclude that usefulness, utility, is the essence of justice. And it is the essence of the virtues. David Hume concludes they are based on pleasure or utility, pleasure or usefulness. This is in contrast to the traditional philosophy, even of Hume's time, where the virtue of justice, the virtue of temperance, and all the other virtues, they're not merely feelings. They are beyond your feelings. They are a reality, a metaphysical reality that we have to conform to. Later on, with the philosophers Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, this notion of utility from David Hume will be utilized in their moral theory of utilitarianism. Another important point is that in David Hume's works that deal with epistemology, Hume arrives at the conclusion that sense impressions are the things that human beings know the most. When he says sense impression, he means some sort of feeling, like when you burn your finger on a hot stove. That idea of hotness is something that you know more than just about anything else. And so when David Hume is giving his ethics, his moral philosophy, and he says that morals are feelings, he does not think that he's putting down ethics. He does not think that he's lowering morality. He thinks that he is giving a firm basis to morality because feelings, which are based off sense impressions, are the things that human beings know the most.